We had Winston on this morning. You would think that maybe the platform has become a supporter of New Zealand First, but I think one of the things that I'm seeing on the platform is that it is becoming a place for politicians who are honest and forthright. And so it's been, in my experience, we're actually seeing people like Shane come on here and talk about the issues that really, really matter to you. Now, whether you like the responses from a political point of view, then that's fine. But we're here to give people a voice, and I'm here to challenge some of their responses around their policies and whether they're going to meet up with the rhetoric that they will use to discuss some of the issues that are important to them as politicians. I've always found Shane pretty honest. He's pretty straight up. And it looks like he's on the line. Good morning, Shane. Good morning, Shane.
Hey, good morning. Kia ora, folks. I'm out of the winterless north down here in Matamata and Dairy Country, where I'm going to support our local candidate, Stu Husband, standing in this green but inevitably blue seat.
The blue seat? Oh, really? I thought you were the black party.
No, what I mean is that the stripes of people's hats around here are predominantly blue, although the landscape is green, farmer green.
Yeah, it is Dairy Country. Isn't that where Jacinda came from as well? Isn't she from up that way somewhere?
Yeah, no. Jacinda put a few hours in at the local fish and chip shop there in Morrinsville.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's certainly an area that has got a lot of wealth, and hey, it's generating a lot of export earnings. So Stu's a farmer, and I've come down after having spent a big day in Dargaville and Maungaturoto in the Kaipara yesterday, chasing what's called an elusive taonga, a vote.
Oh, really? Why are you? So what took you there?
No, well, in the seat of Northland, it stretches from Kaitaia right down to the Kaipara Harbour.
Yep.
And as a part of the campaign, I've been holding a host of meetings in small, ill-frequented locations, and it's working out well. Lots of people are turning out to the meetings.
So what's their big thing? You always get a flavour of this at when you're doing the hustings, don't you? And you're on the town hall circuit, really. What are the big things? Is there some key issues there at every town hall meeting?
Yeah, with every single meeting I go to, the sentiment of change bubbles to the surface in the first questions. And the resentment that too much change is taking place without a democratic mandate. Depending on the age of the people, a lot of the more senior citizens absolutely cannot stand the change in terms of gender theory being put into the education system, co-governance being sprung on them, the attitude of the media, and at a more business level, people are just being strangled by red tape. And, for example, there were a whole host of questions the other day about where did the national policy statement under the Resource Management Act originate from, and why has it now legally established partnership as the principle that local government have to follow before resource consents will be allocated for the Indigenous Biodiversity National Policy Statement.
You need to clarify that in simple speak, Shane. So we've got the national statement, and people are saying it's too heavy. What are you actually getting at?
So under the Resource Management Act, there is a device called a national policy statement.
Yep, I know about them. Yep.
And these are riddled with dense language. And one of the national policy statements is based around how to protect basically native scrub, biodiversity. Yep. And in the north, it led to a host of large protests.
That's right, over the SNAs.
SNAs?
Yeah, SNAs.
Yeah. So unbeknown to the north, these SNAs are now legal, and they're operational come August the 7th. New Zealand First, I've been campaigning by October the 30th. They will be suspended. Right. And people have no idea that the SNA law is going to be take legal effect on August the 7th, and you won't be able to clear any scrub, or you won't be able to do anything that threatens Indigenous biodiversity unless you get a consent with the agreement of the tangata whenua. Winston and I are deeply suspicious about this move, and we see it as co-governance, so we don't like it.
So you're suspicious from a perspective of well, is it co-governance, or is it giving iwi the veto rights? A veto right. Right.
Co-governance is driven by a small, non-accountable group who want veto rights over the private property utilisation of farmers, miners, forestry people.
Yeah.
And the current government never campaigned on it. But anyway, look, you asked me what are the questions. That was an example where a bunch of people associated with farming and land use, they've just woken up to this, so they're hot and bothered about that. And then you get the...
well, the curious thing about the SNAs, though, here's the rub with it, Shane, if I remember right. It was Māori who were most against the SNAs because it meant that they couldn't develop their land, which was often scrub. And I thought that they were one of the main opponents to SNAs in the far north.
Absolutely. And I'm speaking as a proxy for them. However, the Ministry for the Environment, as is often the case, have found some tame green adult hapus, and they've distorted this debate. And these hapu activists, sadly, they're eating green porridge morning, day and night, and I need to put them back where they belong, which is right at the margins of this debate.
I would have to say, though, that's one thing I've just noticed lately in some of the mahi that I've been doing, is I haven't seen the rise of the whanau hapu stuff, and we all hate the big Māori institutions, like I haven't seen it like it is right now. So there is a real emergence of all decision-making should rest with hapu and whānau and bugger the big Māori authorities, post-settlement, pre-settlement entities. And so there's this growing mistrust of Māori of their own, which I've found quite fascinating. And it's quite a loud chorus out there.
Yeah, I think a reset is needed at all levels of New Zealand society, and even within Māoridom. There's a lot of discontent, but I think it's traceable back to a deeper virus of discontent. It's the virus of disunity. You know, when I stand and give my speeches railing against co-governance, I say, I pledge my allegiance, I pledge my fidelity to growing a powerful, far-reaching, wealthy New Zealand.
Yep.
And irrespective of what your perspective is, your creed, your ethnicity, your rights, they come under the umbrella of us bringing back pride in our nation, robustness, resilience, and wealth. And we have now been served up everywhere I look an anti-growth ideology and a philosophy that rewards people who enjoy holding progress to ransom.
And I mean, I want growth that is sustainable too. I want growth that does protect the environment, but I still want growth. And so, New Zealand First, where does it sit on some of this environment stuff?
Well, I've just told you in relation to the National Policy Statement on Biodiversity, that will be suspended. It is impractical and it's superfluous.
Yeah.
In relation to the National Policy Statement on Freshwater Regulations, that needs to be revisited. It's important that we remove from the law references to do with metaphysical spirituality.
Right.
The Supreme Court judges, jurists, secular creatures have no business passing judgment on what's the extent, the character, the form of Māori spiritual concepts. They shouldn't even be in the law. The notion that water has more importance because of its intrinsic inherent qualities beyond its capacity to sustain human life is, number one, a dangerous precedent, and number two, it's a type of Marxist anti-growth ideological platform, and it has to be stripped out.
Yeah. I think it's a debate that is going to go well past the election. It's not. It's quite an angry debate. I think that's the thing that I find really vexing as somebody who sort of works around some of this area. There is a lot of anger and distrust, and I was just talking about that with Jerry before. Jerry Brownlee, the issue around the media at the moment and the continual distrust. And as I said, you guys are out there, and I don't necessarily agree with all your policies, but you're at least trying to be pretty bloody truthful about it. Well, you are anyway. I think sometimes Winston's a bit bloody sophisticated for his own good, but your voice is sort of pretty sound because there is a truth in it, and that's what people are looking for. So in terms of your big policies for New Zealand First, which are the ones that you think will make the most difference?
You've got to go back to the underlying moral force that's driving our campaign. And I'm not talking about Jerry Falwell and religiosity in the southern states of America, but we either are a unified nation under one flag, indivisible citizenship, one nation, or we're going to tolerate, and I never will, the continual divisiveness and polarisation which has taken root in New Zealand. And the distortion of the Treaty of Waitangi, it's now untethered, I believe, from its proper moorings. So
I'm struggling with this whole principle concept. Like a lot of, if you're working in government, they keep coming up with we've got to adhere to the principles of the treaty, and so actually they're not all the same. You work in government across government, and I've seen probably 4 or 5 documents in the last 4 or 5 weeks, and the principles are all described differently. How does that work?
Yeah, but I think it's a deeper issue. Why are we doing any of that anyway? I mean, just look at the awful stats afflicting the Māori community. Not a single stat that I can find is improving, yet the rhetoric and the shrillness associated with the treaty, the principles, and a whole host of other newfound expressions gathers pace. It's time to put all that to the side, which is why New Zealand First passed a remit at the convention that we want to substantially shrink the size of the Waitangi Tribunal and confine it to a residual number of functions dealing with the small remaining claims that are the historical character.
Right.
And if the tribunal wants to wander into areas of self-government, co-governance, the tax system, those matters belong with parliamentarians. Those matters belong with people that have sought an electoral mandate, and they're going to campaign to change the country. We are not having the Waitangi Tribunal with a creeping writ, with increasingly activistic members trying to rewrite the constitutional character of New Zealand, or indeed rewrite legislation and put pressure that ends up creating divisiveness between iwi and New Zealanders, which is why my catch cry is gathering momentum. It's time to put the K back in iwi.
Yeah. I hadn't heard that one. That's quite good. Got the K back in iwi. Yeah. But the thing is, and it's going to haunt you. You're linked up with Jacinda, and it was a dog's breakfast, literally. Apart from some of the good stuff that came out of the PGF, how can the New Zealand public trust you going into a government with if there is a change, and let's say just it's going to be national, and you've got ACT hanging on one side and you on the other? How are we going to convince the voters that that's going to work? How can you do that?
Well, the first thing that New Zealand First is doing is recovering its perch back on the parliamentary landscape. And the Roy Morgan poll
would indicate that you're pretty much there again.
Yeah, well, Winston and I have absolute confidence that we will exceed well and truly the 5%, and I'm going to do exceedingly well in the seat of Northland. But at a deeper level, we have ruled out ever governing with this current Labour government.
Yep.
Winston has said it.
Yep.
I've repeated it. We, in 2017, made a choice on what prospects were there to enable us to achieve the manifesto outcomes we sought to achieve on behalf of the people who voted for us. That's a legitimate democratic outcome.
Mm-hmm.
We then got voted out and all hell broke loose. But I want everyone to remember 420,000 plus voters who had historically hung out with the National Party changed their vote. They crowned Jacinda and gave her unfettered power. It's not credible to blame Winston or I from 2017 for what people did in 2020. Now, most New Zealanders who made that error of judgment don't want to be reminded of it, and that's fine. They made a choice at that particular time, but I tell you what, they're not going to make that mistake again, which is why our support is growing. But I want people, please, to show a certain level of judgment. We had the National on one side, we had the Labour on the other side. National's capacity to deliver and negotiate with us was not strong. Labour enabled New Zealand first to find the additional 1,800 policemen, which grew to 2,300 plus. Recapitalised the military through my friend Ron, Mark. And
is he coming back? Is he coming back, Shane?
Deliver the Provincial Growth Fund. No, he's busy being the Mayor of Carterton down there in
So
Waitangi.
he's not coming back. There's a lot of rumours in the Wairarapa that he might jump.
Oh, well, we'll just have to wait and see. But that's for him to answer.
Right. So you're not actively seeking him?
No, look, it's above my pay grade, but to the best of my knowledge, Ronnie is ensconced as the Mayor of Carterton. Right?
Nice, Shane. It's the first time I feel like there might be some moths in your mouth. When does your list actually come out?
No, in September sometime. It's like the lady in Kaitaia the other day. I gave a speech up there. And then I said, well, you always, I try to tell it as it is, and I lead with my chin. And she said, well, dear, what's your diet? Because there are 3 of them emerging.
But how are you going to work with David Seymour?
Well, let's leave that question to the future. He's out there stirring up, and he has declared war, as I understand this morning, on China. He is hell-bent on stealing more vote from the National Party, but that dynamic between David Seymour and Christopher Luxon is really two shrill individuals stealing each other's lunch. It's New Zealand First that is attracting votes that historically went to Labour, but they now realise they need a moderating influence and they need a robust set of experienced politicians, which Winston and myself represent. So it's up to ACT and National to have their little powwow with each other.
But where does New Zealand First sit on Luxon's announcement to take money from the China's Belt and Road Initiative?
Well, to be honest with you, I just turned the news on earlier this morning.
Yeah.
And that's the first I heard of it. So, no, I guess we'll just wait and we'll turn our attention to it. Look, New Zealand First, we're a practical people. We realise that a lot of our exports and a lot of our goods and services are already being consumed by China. But and we should not hold animus or antipathy towards Chinese people. I have many friends over many years. And indeed, one of my boys got quite good at learning Mandarin because that was a part of the world that he was going to work in. But we have different values, different priorities in our party to the Communist China Party. And our focus in this campaign is most importantly ensuring external influences don't drive more polarisation, more divisiveness in New Zealand, because I've got to tell you, in all of these town hall meetings I've been having, and I'm up to about 12 or 15 now, I have never encountered the level of discord that is motivating people to turn out and complain that they're inheriting a quality of life, a civic culture that they never voted for, they never asked for, and they feel disempowered.
Oh, yeah, there's definitely a lot. You go to the pub on Stewart Island or, you go out for a meal, and it's not just in political circles, Shane, it's right throughout society. It's a very uncomfortable time for a lot of people on a lot of fronts. Financial, you're right, societal, big issues, I can't. The one thing about the whole gender thing that really I can't quite come to grips with is, I got, like everyone else, I've got friends and family who are gay, and they just want to be like everyone else. They want to be accepted for their differences, but they just want to be treated like everyone else, not special. But there seems to be this rise of, because they are of a different gender, we should be treating them specially. And that seems to me where the argument always sort of gets to is, what's the story here? We were happy to, like as a nation, we've done the civil marriage stuff, so we've been quite supportive of that community, I think, and reasonably sort of liberal around it. And yet suddenly we're now going to treat them as special, not just as part of our society, who have a different type of sexual proclivity.
Yes, I suspect it came when the Labour Party changed the legislation and increased the ease at which you could change your nominated gender. Because you can't change your biology, okay?
Yeah.
Naturally, we do pick up on international influences, but know this from me. I've spoken to hundreds of women who resent the fact that they now have to share toilets with people who aren't women.
Yeah.
But they themselves, I said yesterday when a lady asked me the question in Maunga Turoto, I said, I come from Kaitaia, Awanui, and we grew up with an old term which was tuote wahine or mana wahine, which means the power and the authority of woman. I said, I learnt my Māori language from my grandmother, born in 1892, had 17 children.
Yeah.
The fact that we are exhausting emotional, political capital on a tiny, marginal minority issue driven by an unaccountable, tiny, loud group of tranny activists, in my view, is evidence of where there's an inverse relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's 5 million people in New Zealand, maybe we're talking about 1% of the population.
I don't know.
Maybe even less. So if we're talking about 0.5%, I'm not going to exhaust one iota of energy, political capital driving that agenda. I'm more interested in ensuring that we deal with the deep fundamental challenges in New Zealand, and we're being diverted for a tiny, noisy group who really are irrelevant to the march of New Zealand's future.
Yeah.
And the sooner that we start putting them where they belong as one voice in a multitude of voices, and the media stop writing everything up. For example, when Posey Parker, and I'm happy that she's coming back to New Zealand, I hope that happens before the election, because there's one party that's going to stand up for women's rights and stand up for rights of freedom of speech and stare down that ungainly, unkempt, angry, dangerous crowd of the tranny activists who tried to drive her out of New Zealand. It's New Zealand first.
Good. Yep. You haven't got, I totally get that, because as a woman, we've had our fights over the years, and now suddenly they're being eroded by this mob, and I find that quite reprehensible. But it's the same thing. It's about fairness, and I don't see anything fair in a biological male who's who wants to be recognised as a female running against a biological female who wants to be recognised as a female. That's not fair. It's just simply not fair. So I just really cringe at the issues that we're facing in sport now, and how that's playing out.
We can clean all that out. It just needs political will.
But you're right about the substantive issues, Shane, too. And I just want to touch on something before we go to the news. And it happened in Wairarapa over the weekend. So get up, go out to get the mail, and there's no mailbox. And these two cars apparently went right. They must have done 40 or 50 miles of letterboxes. Smashed them all. Smashed everything that they could get right through. Must have spent hours doing it. And I understand that the cars were stolen, so you can't confiscate the cars. And so you end up with a situation where you've got young criminals you can't do bugger all with, really, right at the moment. and with wanton destruction, it was probably in the tens of thousands of dollars. Sounds really stupid. Sounds like it's only a small imposition for individuals, but we've got a broken system in dealing with young people's crime. How are you going to fix it?
Well, if you are young and you are continuing to molest your community and you've been fed a diet that I don't have to take responsibility for my actions, New Zealand First view is you're on your way to Ngāpā prison. And after 6 or 9 months in there, if there's a really bad seed within you, then I couldn't have done much to save you anyway. But if you want to change your ways, start by saving yourself. And if you're not going to change your ways, and if you're not going to accept responsibility, and you're going to continue to molest the community, I don't want you in the community. And I don't care if you have a bad time in prison. You're going to prison. End of story.
Yep. And that's it. I think they've just shifted.
And I don't want to hear any more shrill voices justifying this criminality on the basis of colonialism, a victimhood ideology, or the Pākehā version rather than the Maori version of the Treaty of Waitangi wasn't taught at school. No, if you're going to continue on this track of wanton destructiveness, criminality, thuggery and violence, then you're off to prison. End of story. Goodbye.
There's plenty of spaces there now.
I don't care any longer. Just go. You can eat porridge. Bye-bye.
Yep. And on that note, thank you very much, Shane, and enjoy your...
See you guys.